Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and there are a lot of gear options in this game. As I approach level 30 on my character that I'm using for my on a budget walkthrough, I figured making a gear guide for everybody would be a good idea. I'll be going off of ZY Hunter's spreadsheet that I'll link in the description, with a few tweaks of my own as I go along to ensure everyone knows the absolute best gear that you can get, no matter your level. While I got most of everything that you can get, I definitely missed a couple things, so feel free to leave a comment if you think that there's anything that I left out. As I have been doing in my first few episodes of my budget walkthrough, I just use bizarre gear up until level 30, and I prioritize gear that gives me the most health, because in the early worlds, if you're just starting out and you don't have a good pet, survivability can honestly be an issue. There were numerous times in Crocotopia where I was sure I was cooked because I didn't have enough health to survive, and without an AoE, it's very hard to do what you do for most of the game and just kill before you get killed. Bizarre gear that gives a lot of health will be extremely useful for when you're just starting out, and I would recommend sticking to the Wand of the 7 Schools for its 5% accuracy buff until at least level 20, when you can buy a wand that gives a starting pip. This is the level range in which you can obtain the highest number of gear sets from a variety of places. You could really replace your gear every 10 levels here, which I honestly think is a bit unrealistic, but you know, it's each their own. I'll still give you my personal recommendations though. At level 25, you can access Kambalung Village, which is this from Crocotopia, and I'd honestly say skip this one. There's some cool stuff that you can get here, and there's honestly some really great amulets that drop for the level, but it's just not worth the grind, and I'd just say stick with what you have until level 30. That's the first notable power spike, Mount Olympus. When you hit level 30, Cyrus Drake will give you a tutorial tip telling you to come to him for the quest to get here to Mount Olympus. After you do all that, you're ready to farm. And up until this point, you've probably, fizzled a bunch, pit failed at inopportune moments, or have been like, 10 HP short of killing that boss. But now there is a full set of Zeus gear to get, and as you fight through Olympus, the two most notable bosses here are Ares' Savage Spear and Zeus Skyfather himself. The former is guaranteed to drop the Sky Iron Hasta, which gives a starting power pip, as well as a 10% damage boost. This is, understandably, the best wand you'll be able to get for a very long time. As for Zeus, this is where you get your clothes from. It'll give a slight boost to your power pip chance and accuracy, but the main reason why you farm this is so you can get the extra damage from it. That's going to be the primary stat that you go for over the course of the game, so this is really where it all starts. There is also a lower tier set called the Senator's set, which drops from all of the main bosses. If it's taken a while to get your full Zeus set, like it usually does, let's be real, these pieces aren't bad and will definitely get you through. At level 40, you will be given the opportunity to come here to Barkingham Palace, and alongside Kambalung Village mentioned earlier, this is one of the 4 dungeons that got added around 10 years ago, and it's really not that much more useful. Some neat rings drop from here, I guess, but they aren't really worth getting. There is a wooden skeleton key boss, Billy the Cutter, in the State Wing, and he drops better rings, but again, that's key boss, and therefore not worth the hassle. Especially if you're only level 40. You can come back for the Dapper Corky that he also drops at a later date, because it does give a nice little energy boost by default, so yeah, but worry about that later. All throughout the first 2 arcs there's, crafted gear to go get, but I really wouldn't worry about it until you get to Zafaria. Just something to quickly touch on. Level 50 is the next notable gear upgrade. The only problem is it is a Nova style farm, so it'll be extremely tedious to get. Olympus will get you through. The Dragonspire gear set, it really is good, especially the ones as they give, sizable amount of pierce, but there's not much of a point getting, 9 hats, robes, and boots with the famous waterworks around the corner. It's a shame because this gear is, as you can see, pretty insane, like I said, and it is such an upgrade, but any max could tell you how bad Nova's farming is, and they'll encourage you to just skip it. The Thames and Rings, I'd honestly say, are worth farming, just because you haven't really had a great alternative up to this point, so it's good to go for those. They give more pip chance than the Winter Tusk level 56 accessories, if memory serves. The Thames do at least, so they'll be good for the foreseeable future because of that. The best gear set at this point is definitely, you know, full Dragon Spire gear. You could even get like like these two ice blades from the Spider Keeper's Frost Charm, but as you can see, it's a lot of farming. And it'll honestly probably take you longer to get all this gear than it will to just quest the 10 levels to get to Waterworks. The best amulet at this level, and it continues to be the best amulet through to max level at the moment, is the Jewel of the Faint, which you can occasionally find in the Bazaar. This gives an extra stackable Faint item card, which is going to be extremely as important as you make your way through the second arc. Get this as soon as you hit level 50. There's also Auric Night Gliders rings that drop from Brispree's Tower. I noticed while grinding Monstrology that the drop rates are actually pretty good from here, but they're also super diluted because there's 8 rings that drop, so I guess farm at your own risk because it's a long tower. Definitely worse than the Dragon Spire rings though. I briefly mentioned the Winter Tusk level 56 gear, and you know, there's a pretty solid set there. I highly recommend the Winter Tusk crafted hat over both Waterworks and House of Scales because it gives an extra stackable blade item card. If you have the aforementioned Jewel of the Faint, then that combined with the Winter Tusk hat will make for a much better experience as you go along in the second arc. The Sharpened Blade and Potent Trap cards do not unlock until the back half of Azteca, so buff stacking is going to be really important up until you get there, and I'll have a video on that probably Tuesday, so if you're a new viewer, stay tuned. There's also the robes and boots, which are, you know, pretty decent, but again, it's level 56, which is 4 levels before you hit Waterworks, so if you want them and they're not too costly in terms of reagents for you, I would say go for it. The Blood Moss can be a little tough. The Thamesen rings that drop from Nasterond can also be found in the Bazaar, albeit much more rarely, and that gives solid damage too, so if you don't get the Dragon Spire accessories, these work too. The thing is, you've gotta have one or the other. There's really not a great alternative available that gives as much damage and pip chance as they do, so if there isn't a Bear's Claw Storm or whatever school you're playing in the Bazaar, it might be worth it to go back and farm the Gurtok Piercer and the Great Spire for a minute. And so we arrive at level 60. At this pivotal level in your wizard's journey, you have a couple options. The first of which is farming Waterworks right here for dramatic increases in damage and resist. You can also get better accuracy or power pip chance depending on your school from this gear, and this has been the set to go for since its release in 2011. So if you're level 60, like, you know, Kyle here, looking to get some more gear, this is the place to go. He's got the full set for death, so, I mean, look at that. That's a lot of damage. Like, this is definitely worth getting. The drop rates really aren't that bad, and you can run it with a good team repeatedly, and it won't take you that long to get everything. Alternatively, there's the more offense-oriented House of Scales set. The drop rates are honestly pretty horrible, and it's a very long farm, but it's well worth it if you're a more offense-oriented school. The House of Scales set gives more damage and less resist, as well as a little bit of pip chance on top of accuracy. And I would argue this is the better set to go for, but as I mentioned, the drop rates make me want to skip this entirely and just get Waterworks. For 6 of the schools, the robes give a mass prism item card, which can be very helpful if you're fighting mobs or bosses that are the same school as you, because trying to get prisms onto both is a pain and takes longer and all that. I highly recommend running House of Scales at least a couple times to see if you might get lucky, because those gear pieces are seriously really great, and every bit of damage counts as you're going into the second arc. Alternatively, in Lower Zigzag, which is over that way, there is a wooden skeleton key room that has a chance to drop an amulet that gives 2% damage to your school. This is the only amulet in the game that just flat out gives damage. So you do, like, Lower Zigzag is the prequest to this, so, you know, if you have a wooden skeleton key, you might as well give it a shot, see what you get. At level 66, if you are a legendary artisan, you can craft the Zafaria gear from Koyate Ghostmane here in the Baobab Market. It's not really that great, if I'm honest. I mean, Ice gets some use out of it, but yeah, you know, otherwise I would say skip this. The same then happens again at level 74 here in Avalon. If you want, you can craft the gear from Llewellyn here in Dundara. This gear is better than the Zafaria crafted stuff for every school. I did actually run the nightly armor on my life wizard back when, you know, crit mattered more, but as of late, this stuff has really fallen out of meta due to the crit change, and Waterworks / House of Scales is really just still better. It's really a shame because the Avalon crafted gear was honestly way better back in the day due to how much crit it gave. Like, let me find it. Yeah, the horn helmet. This gave 88 crit for ice. Like, that's honestly crazy. But, I mean, crit's mostly a dead stat now, so unlucky, I guess. The Azteca crafted gear from later in that world also met the same fate, so again, it's not worth going for. I actually forgot about this while writing the script, but Atlantia over here is available at level 70. None of the gear is better. Don't bother if I'm honest. The Pierce is neat, but it comes at the cost of so much damage, making it not worth going for. Plus, the dungeon is so long, I'll probably just do it once, like just to do it on my walkthrough character, but never again. It's pain. The only saving grace is that the Sand Squid Tentacle side boss at level 90 has an extremely high drop rate for the Mastery Amulets at that level, which I guess would work in a pinch if you're raiding. I mean, Arch Mastery kind of defeats the purpose that they used to have, but I mean, at that point, like, I would say just use Omen. It's also good drop rates, and they give like blade guards and stuff, so yeah, not even the good stuff here is good. The follow-up to Atlantia is Tartarus at level 90. This is the longest dungeon in the game, discounting having a bad team in the Nightmare. But if you want a hyper-aggressive set that completely throws resist out the window while also increasing your damage, pierce, critical, power pip chance, and accuracy, then this is where you can find that. Due to the grindy nature of the dungeon, however, it is understandable if you don't want to run it over and over. It's not that far above Waterworks in terms of how good the gear is, and around here is when Pierce Jewels cap out at 6%, so if you want to increase your Pierce, just socket those Circle Jewels on your Athame and Ring. Speaking of, the Aquila, Athame, and Ring that drop from the level 90 side bosses are must-haves. The Blade of the Fell Titan gives 15 damage and a ton of pip chance, and it drops from Cronus, the side boss in the Cave of Nyx here in Tartarus. This is typically an upgrade of, 6 to 10 damage depending on the school, and it also gives a bit more pip chance, so definitely get this when you hit level 90. The Alpha and Omega Ring drops from Gladiator Demicharis in Mount Olympus in the Pit of the Noxy. This is definitely the more annoying farm, but 10 damage and a lot of pip chance is way too good to pass up. While both of these pieces are replaceable at level 100 in Darkmoor, from my experience, I can tell you that the drop rates for the ring upgrade are so bad to where you should probably just stick with the Alpha and Omega Ring until Garamel. Darkmoor. It's become a staple in everyone's journey just because of how good it is. At this point, your Waterworks or House of Scales gear has probably been getting old, and you've been noticing that your damage just isn't cutting it with some of these bosses with insane health. Farming Darkmoor is something that everyone's got to do because the best in slot pieces for almost everything drop here. Level 100 is an important milestone, and every school has gear to farm at this level. I'll get back to Darkmoor in a second though, because right now I want to bring up Exalted duels, specifically the Rattlebones and Crocopatra duels, not either of these. The Crocopatra Exalted hats and Rattlebones robes for the defensive schools, being Ice, Life, and Death, are definitely better, and I'd highly recommend going for them over the Darkmoor robe and hat if that's the role that your class falls into. Oftentimes, these pieces even give more damage than Darkmoor, which is honestly ironic, but hey, you get the best of both worlds there. You do have to watch your accuracy and pip chance though, because these typically give less of both in favor of better stats elsewhere. After the 2022 Merciless gear change, the Dragonspire set I talked about earlier was introduced, but that update also added a Chrysalis set at level 100. The hat and robe honestly pale in comparison to the Darkmoor stuff since they don't get pip chance, and while the boots don't either, if you can make up that pip chance elsewhere, that's the pair of boots you want to go for. They give much better offensive stats, and they beat out the Darkmoor boots in my opinion. They're well worth getting if you can make up the pips. They drop from Lorcan in the galleries though, so there's a good chance it might take a while to get, and the Chrysalis sword and shield wands are by far the best in slot, beating out even pack wands at the level, surprisingly. But these drop from the tedious tree root bosses though, which are through this spirit plane door here, so it's going to be a rough farm. Usually there's an alternative that's good enough, but the balance sword and shield, for example, let me show it to y'all. But yeah, I mean, look at this. It gives 18 damage, 5 pierce, all of that crit and block, which is just too good to pass up. At least it's got a pity system, even though it is as bad as Novus's. I did have to farm the 9 lower tier ones from the tree root bosses and then get all of the pollen motes and whatnot and craft it in sardonyx, but it's well worth it. I mean, 18 damage and 5 pierce, that's way better than like the Sinbad wand that I just have had sitting around forever. Anyway, back to Darkborn. The best in slot pieces are as follows: hats for most schools, robes for most schools, Aphames, amulets, rings, and decks. Yevgeny Night Creeper in the graveyard drops in a thing that looks like a marginal upgrade from the Cronus Aphame I mentioned earlier at first glance, but the second Circle Jewel it gives, along with 2% accuracy just for free, makes it well worth farming. Throw another Pierce Jewel in, and you've got yourself the best Aphame until level 150. The best amulet drops from Shane Bond Shane up here in the upper halls, and it gives, 4% Pierce and 4% Resist with an Azteca aura matching your school. Needless to say, that's pretty solid. The ring, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Alpha and Omega will get you through, but the best ring by, 2% damage that you can get is the ring that drops from Aphrodite through the graveyard's Stone Skeleton Key Gate. Fair warning, it took me 80 runs to get the ring for my balance, and I didn't bother with any of my other characters, but it gives 12 damage and a ton of pip chance. If you can get this, then that's huge. The decks are actually crafted from Harker over here in the main area. You'll unfortunately need to catch 2 pretty rare fish and get motes from the prior dungeons, like House of Scales and Cambalong Village, or from specific Exalted duels, which is pretty annoying, but it gives you that coveted starting pip with a triangle jewel socket, which is where you can make up for lost pip chance if you ever decide to use the Chrysalis boots. From here, it's honestly pretty smooth sailing all the way through to the 4th arc. There are occasional upgrades like the Baba Yaga decks at level 105 and Omen Rat decks at level 110, followed by, Arcanum Crafted Wands at 115 and 125. And stuff like the Tennyson Robe at 125 as well, but you don't really see many upgrades that are worthwhile even with the Dragoon gear here. The Dragoon hats, boots, and amulets are pretty good, as they always have been, but grinding all that extract is not exactly time efficient. The option is still there. If you happen to hit level 30 around the time they run double reagents, I'd say maybe go for one piece, because the hat and boots really are leagues better than the level 100 stuff. At level 138, you can get the Executive Wands and Director Rings from the Bazaar. These drop here in Caramel and give insane amounts of damage, with the Director Ring giving the most damage out of every ring in the game until much later in the 4th arc. Nothing notable really comes up in Lemuria prior to 150, except the, Supreme Wands at level 148, which are really just upgraded Executive Wands, so if you can get your hands on that, then huge, I guess. When the Merciless Gear update happened in early 2022, it standardized the best gear into these end-of-world sets. This trend has continued on through Wallaroo at the end of this game, and it's created the situation where you've got to spend a lot of time farming after every world drops, which I can't say I'm a fan of, but it was what it was. Anyway, the best robes from 150 onwards are the Nullity robes, which drop from the Dragonspire raid, which you have to be in a guild to get, and that's a whole thing, but the 150 version is by far the best at 150, and while the Reaver robes do close the gap a little bit, the 160 version of the Nullity robe that I have right here for an ice is best in slot, and that's not changing until the template is renewed, which is rumored to be happening in this summer with the Polaris raid. Otherwise, the best pieces are all from the End of World set, with some alternatives popping up here and there. Nobody really farms Hall Heroes Challenge mode, so there's a good chance you won't be able to get your level 150 Merciless gear, but due to the inaccessibility of the new Nightmare dungeon, people do still farm Eon in Novus, and of course there's people farming Dreamweaver stuff in Wallaroo. You can still get teams to do the Nightmare in standard mode, but if you think it's not worth the hassle, Eon will still get you through. You can still hit the stat caps with Eon gear. I don't even have Stalker, or Reaver rather, stuff on my ice right now. so I'm just rocking Eon if I ever need to. So again, with the exception of the Nullity Robe, the best pieces for every piece of the set come from the End of World gear set. Wallaroo especially, because of the new jewel templates on the amulets and decks. Like, this is a Wallaroo template. It's a new circle jewel, and this is also a Wallaroo template. Like, there's squares, but then there's also circles, and it's like, take your pick. There's these new damage percentage increase in jewels that drop here in Wallaroo, so that's really the main appeal of the new circle slot decks. But yeah, I think that is gonna wrap up. That's my full game gear guide, so I hope y'all enjoyed. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. Shout out Lucky, and I will see y'all later.